Shalom Aleichem. This coming Friday, Yutes Cheshvan, is the yahrtzeit of Harav HaChassid Reb Meilech Zwiebel. Reb Meilech Zwiebel, as we called him in Yeshiva, Reb Meilech. So, I'd like to share with you a little bit about his style of Farbrengens. Every year, I try to touch upon something unique of this great, giant Talmud Chacham and Chassid. He was our Mashpia in Morristown, 1979 through 1981. And in particular, I had become very close to him in listening to his shiurim, his Siddur shiurim, being an editor for the Ha'aretz Atmimim, and having constant contact with him regarding the Ha'aretz, the remarks on the Rebbe Sichos that we published every week for Shabbos. But today I want to talk about his Farbrengens, and in a way compare them to Farbrengens of other Mashpiyim, Reb Yoel Kahn, Reb Mendel Futterfass, Reb Avram Mayor, Reb Zalman Gopin. There are many different Farbrengers. I'm talking about from those years, from the late 70s, early 80s. And everyone has their Meilech, their advantage. Reb Meilech's Farbrengen was opening for a bacher, for a student, the entire picture of Lubavitch, of Chabad history and Chabad Warmkeit, warmth. Now, you have to understand that Meilech, without taking a little mashke, was more of a, what we would call a cold person, meaning he wasn't very forthcoming. He was more of a very strong intellectual, very removed. You had to come to him usually. And I don't say that in any, bad way, a negative way. Rather, that was his, that was his nature. There are people who are more warm, people who are more cold. But at the Farbrengen, that's when you saw a different side to him. You would think it's two different people. It's not the same person you heard shiurim from and spoke to on an average day. First of all, he would tell us stories and anecdotes, but not long ones, not long drushes. The Farbrengen was a Farbrengen. Today, Farbrengens by many people have become drushes, sermons, lectures. That's not a Farbrengen. It's a sermon, it's a shiur. He would say a Maisa, a Vort, that he heard usually many times from Reb Shlomo Chaim, who repeated the name of Greinem, the Mashpia in Lubavitch. Reb Shlomo Chaim was a Talmud of Greinems, or Reb Moshe Gerari of Chassidim, that he heard stories from. Kurze, short, brief, but very, very, very to the point. And many times he wouldn't even teach it out. He wouldn't even elaborate. You would have to kind of think about it and come to understand yourself. Other times he did add some verbiage to explain what he means with the story. So I don't mean stories, long Baal Shem Tov stories with the Chayza stories. I don't mean that. I mean kurze, vertlach, and also stories of Chassidim, not just of Rebbes, but of Chassidim. So this was the first time that we were coming from Ocean Parkway, from the Lubavitch Yeshiva. And we had a wonderful special mashpia, a better Lipsker, Zalzain Gesund. But it was a different style. The Meilech brought the reichav and the eirach, the breadth and the width of Chassidus Chabad as encapsulated in the Sikhs of the Frierdiker Rebbe, where he talks about this Chassid, Yankel the Geller, Yossel the Reiter, and things like that. And this made a big impression on us. So in addition to learning Chassidus, and it was with him that we, our heads began opening up to understand the Vart Chassidus. because until then it wasn't that way. It was more textual, and it was more like learning a piece of Gemara, learning a piece of Chassidus. But the idea of delving into to an idea and thinking about it and doing something with it, that all started in Morristown, at least for me, and I believe I'm speaking for my friends as well, and most Talmidim that were involved. But going back to the Farbrengen, so the first Nakuda is, he opened for us the door to the larger picture of Chabad Lubavitch through stories and anecdotes, not just of Rabbeim, but of Chassidim. So I remember him talking about, and not just Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, Moshe Velenker, Reb Pinchas Reizes, but let's say Avram David Pesner was a chayzer by the Rebbe Rashab. We never heard his name. Who is this guy? What's going on? And he told us about him. And so he spoke about such Chassidim. That was one point. Another point is he took l'chaim, but he took l'chaim in a way that he wasn't, taking cups of vodka. That's not what he was doing. But because he said a maisa and then a l'chaim and a maisa and a l'chaim, so if he spoke for 5-10 minutes, a l'chaim, 5-10 minutes, a l'chaim, it all added up. So as we got into the second hour of the Farbrengen, you could see him you can hear him raising his voice. And when he starts raising his voice, the mashke is already having an impact on him. And we enjoyed that. Again, we enjoyed it because the Farbrengen was now starting to come together. Farbrengen requires several items. Participants who are interested in listening, a speaker who has what to say, and who he lives with what he has to say, nigunim, singing of real Chabad nigunim, okay, tveikus nigunim, hisaydus nigunim, slow nigunim, and also lebedik nigunim, but nigunim, and saying l'chaim. When you put all three things together, you get a genuine gewaltige Farbrengen. And unfortunately, this is a lost art today. Many Farbrengens, and everyone's running to Farbrengens. Was happened from the Farbrengen? If the elements are not there, you must have those elements. So, schlucking mashke, drinking a lot of alcohol, is not a Farbrengen. Only singing and draining a cup, is also not a Farbrengen. And if no one's listening, it's also not a Farbrengen. And finally, if the speaker doesn't live with what he says, it's also not a Farbrengen. Now, versteht sich, today we do what we can. Everyone does what they can. Anyway, we go back to the Nekuda that the Chassidish Farbrengen by Meilech was very uplifting and inspiring. So we're into the second hour, and we can hear his voice rising, so we know the mashke is taking effect, and we sing more nigunim, and he tells more, and then there's the third hour. Usually Farbrengen was about 3 hours with him. The third hour was blowout time, because we Bachrim also said l'chaim, so the spirit was there, and that's when he could say sometimes a sharp word to a Bacher, a Yisaydish word to arouse yourself and wake yourself up and talk to a Bacher at a Farbrengen. And all of a sudden, he picks himself up, and he starts dancing. So we all danced. We knew that this is the end of the Farbrengen. He didn't sit back down. Once he got up and he started to dance, you knew that the Farbrengen is ending. But it didn't end right there. We danced in circles, like Chassidim, like Lubavitch Chassidim. We danced in circles. And then afterwards, many times, he made a kula. He made a somersault. And the intent was we should emulate him, and we made somersaults too. I don't know if this was at every Farbrengen, but it was at many Farbrengens. And this was the end of the Farbrengen. But it doesn't finish there. Then he walked himself to the steps, to go down the steps from the Beis Medrash Zal on the third floor, I believe. If he was very shikir, someone had to hold him. But if not, he would walk himself down, and you could see how he's, trying to control himself after taking quite a bit of mashke. This 3-hour experience was exhilarating. If you didn't wake up the next morning to learn Chassidus, you weren't at the Farbrengen, and it was impossible. What do I mean? Yeah, of course, if you went on to Farbrengen with your friends and you stayed up most of the night, you didn't get up the next morning. But normally, after a Farbrengen, with a good Farbrengen like that I'm describing now, the next day we had a strong ratzon, a strong will to be at the Farbrengen, to be at Seder Chassidus, to get up in the morning. These Farbrengens for us, for these 2 years, changed our view of life. See, Rabbi Yoel, his Farbrengen is very different. He can Farbrengen for 5, 6, 7 hours and take one inyan, one idea, and dissect it from all, and he doesn't say so. But his story, it's a whole different, Rabbi Yoel changes dein cup. You know, Lubavitch is a famous Meisa, when er beholder out there, kommst in Lubavitch, kommst du überbeiten dem Cup, bersten dem Cup. Rabbi Yoel changed our head, the way to think about something. And that's a very important thing, and maybe the main thing, but that's a different nekuda. Rebel in Ocean Parkway taught us his kashrus, you know, like Chassidishkeit, eingebackene, eingekarbte Chassidishkeit. And Meilech brought this, the arum from Chassidus, we call it, the environment, the atmosphere of Chassidus became very, very alive for us. So in this chus, his yahrtzeit, Yutes Cheshvan, a day before Cheshvan, when he would always Farbrengen, I remember, may the Shama have an aliyah, his family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren should have only simchas and good health, parnasa, and all of us who were his talmidim should do something for him. Say l'chaim, learn about Chassidus, think about what I'm sharing with you, and the Eibishter will help. Everyone will rise with Mashiach's coming. V'hu b'teicham, Malkeinu b'Rasheinu, our Rebbe, going together to Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, b'mheira v'yameinu. Amen.